The hotel suite in Tokyo smelled of expensive leather, imported whiskey, and resentment. Marilyn Monroe stood in the doorway at 11:47 p.m., still wearing the traveling suit wrinkled from the military transport flight. There was Korean mud on her heels. Her husband didn't look up from his newspaper. Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee clipper, America's hero, sat in the leather chair by the window like a judge waiting to deliver a sentence. The room was too quiet. Tokyo hummed 20 floors below, but inside this suite, silence pressed down like a physical thing. "Joe," she whispered, her voice that famous breathy whisper that made studio executives rich. "You should have seen it." He turned the page of the sporting news. The rustle of paper was the only response. 100,000 of them, Joe. Maybe more. They stood in the mud for hours just to see me. Some marched through the night. There were boys who cried when I sang. Actually cried. He turned another page, took a slow sip of his whiskey. The ice cubes clinked against crystal. "She wanted to tell him about the cold that turned your breath into ghosts and your sequined dress into a cage of ice. She wanted to tell him about the boy with shrapnel scars who cried during Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, because it reminded him that normal life still existed. She wanted to tell him about the moment on stage when 100,000 men screamed her name and she finally understood what it felt like to be loved, not desired, not objectified, loved." But Joe DiMaggio didn't want to hear about Korea. He wanted his wife, the woman who cooked pasta and stayed home and never reminded the world that she was Marilyn Monroe. The problem was, Norma Jeane didn't know how to be that woman. "Joe, please," she said. "Please just look at me." He looked up. His dark Italian eyes were empty. "You done?" he asked, his voice flat. "Done with what?" "Playing dress-up for the army." The words hit her like a physical blow. "I wasn't playing. Those men got to see my wife shake her ass in a dress so tight you had to be sewn into it. You know how that makes me look. I was helping them, Joe. The morale. You were being Marilyn Monroe." He stood up now, all 6'2" of him. "That's what you do. You put on the costume, and you wiggle, and you make men want things they can't have. That's the act." "It's not an act." "Yes, it is." His voice rose sharp and sudden. "An act. A performance. And I'm tired of being married to a performer." The silence that followed was louder than 100,000 men screaming her name. She saw it clearly for the first time. He didn't love Marilyn Monroe. He loved the idea of retiring her, of being the man who tamed Hollywood's wildest sex symbol, of winning the prize every man wanted and locking it away where no one else could look. He'd married her to end her, but Korea had taught her something. Norma Jeane needed Marilyn, because Norma Jeane alone, the orphan, the foster kid, wasn't enough. Only Marilyn got to be loved by 100,000 men at once. Only Marilyn got to matter. "I'm going to bed," she said quietly, and walked into the bedroom. She closed the door, locked it, slid down to sit with her back against the wood, still smelling like Korean winter and the sweat of desperate adoration. And she cried. Not for Joe, for the version of herself she'd met on that frozen stage, the one who'd felt real, the one who'd felt enough. February 1954, the golden age of Hollywood, was a machine built on beautiful lies. It ran on starlets' tears and studio contracts that owned you more completely than any master ever could. Marilyn Monroe was the machine's favorite product. Platinum blonde, 37 to 23, 36, breathy voice, the fantasy every man wanted. She'd spent 10 years building Marilyn, 10 years of bleaching her hair until it felt like straw, 10 years of voice lessons to perfect that whisper, 10 years of being told she was stupid, gorgeous, difficult and worth millions by executives who paid her pennies compared to male stars. 10 years of being Norma Jeane in private and Marilyn in public, until the line between them blurred. But 2 weeks earlier, she'd become normal. She married Joe DiMaggio in San Francisco on January 14, 1954, wearing a modest dark suit. They fled to Japan for a honeymoon. She promised the press she was retiring. Mrs. DiMaggio would be a housewife, cook pasta, have babies, disappear. The studio had other plans. 20th Century Fox didn't spend 10 years building the Marilyn Monroe brand to watch her retire at 27. The contract she'd signed owned her until 1957. So when the call came in Tokyo about Korea, she'd known it wasn't a request, it was an order. But the United States Army had sweetened the deal. It was about the boys her age who'd taped her pictures to barracks walls, boys who might die tomorrow. "It's just 4 days, her agent said. "The boys in Korea need you." Joe had been furious. "We're on our honeymoon," but she'd already said yes. Because when 100,000 soldiers asked for Marilyn Monroe, how could Norma Jeane, who'd never been anyone's first choice, who'd been returned by foster families, who'd married at 16 to escape the orphanage, say no? The C-54 military transport from Tokyo to Seoul had no heat, no cushioned seats, just metal benches and diesel fuel smell. She wore a simple skirt and sweater, no makeup, hair in a scarf. The officers kept stealing glances, then looking away, as if catching her without the mask was indecent. One young lieutenant kept staring. "Sorry, ma'am, it's just you look different without all the makeup," she offered. "I was going to say you look normal." She laughed, sharp and bitter. Normal, wouldn't that be something? He didn't see Norma Jeane Mortensen, born June 1, 1926, to a mother who went mad and a father who never acknowledged her. He didn't see the girl who'd lived in 11 foster homes by age 7. He didn't see the woman told by every man in Hollywood that she was too stupid to act, too sexual to be taken seriously. She pressed her forehead against the frozen window. In the reflection she saw her real face. No false eyelashes, no beauty mark penciled above her lip, no foundation hiding the freckles. Just a 27-year-old woman with tired eyes and a smile practiced since the orphanage, learning that pretty girls got dinner while ugly girls got forgotten. Don't think about that. You're Marilyn now. Marilyn doesn't have a past. But Norma Jeane always remembered. Being 6 when her mother was dragged away to the psychiatric hospital. Being 12 when the first foster father looked at her wrong. Being 16 and pregnant, married to escape the orphanage. The photographer in 1945 who said, "You've got something, kid," and how she'd grabbed it with both hands, even when it meant bleaching her hair until her scalp burned, even when it meant walking lessons from an executive who grabbed her ass and called it motivation. She remembered becoming Marilyn Monroe in 1947, legally changing her name, killing Norma Jeane on paper. The plane descended through thick clouds. Seoul appeared below, half destroyed by war. "Welcome to Korea, Miss Monroe," the pilot said. She looked at her reflection one last time, saw Norma Jeane staring back. "Goodbye," she whispered. "It's Marilyn's turn now." Private First Class Danny Reeves was 19, from a Kansas town so small it didn't have a movie theater. He'd seen Marilyn Monroe once, on a poster in the barracks, that shot from Niagara where she wore pink and looked over her shoulder. Half his unit had that poster. Some kissed it before patrol, some just stared. He'd been in Korea 6 months, watched his friend Tommy take shrapnel in the throat and drown on his own blood, learned that war wasn't glory, just mud and blood, and knowing you might be next. When the announcement came that Marilyn Monroe was coming, nobody believed it. "It's propaganda," Martinez said. "They're lying to boost morale." But then trucks arrived, construction equipment, lumber, stage lights. "She's really coming." Danny volunteered for stage setup, spent 2 days in freezing mud, hammering planks and stringing lights, 16-hour shifts for the chance to see her. Building that stage gave him something to focus on besides Tommy's screams still echoing in his skull. The morning she arrived, Danny was checking microphone cables. His hands were cracked and bleeding from the cold. He heard the Jeep, then her laugh, bright and musical, and somehow sad. "Is this where I'm supposed to make magic?" The voice came from behind him. That breathy voice every man in America recognized. He turned slowly, and there she was. Except not. She wore an army parka 3 sizes too big. Her platinum hair was tied back simply. No makeup, no costume. She looked tired, real, human. "Is this where I'm supposed to make magic?" she asked again. He dropped the cable. "Yes, ma'am. This is it." She smiled, not the movie star smile, but something smaller, more breakable. "I'm nervous. Do you think they'll like me?" Danny stared. Marilyn Monroe was asking a Kansas farm boy if soldiers would like her. "Ma'am, you could read the phone book and they'd give you a standing ovation." She laughed, and it sounded like relief. "What's your name, soldier?" "Danny." "Ma'am, Private First Class Reeves." "Well, Danny," she said, extending a cold, small human hand. "I'm Norma Jeane. Nice to meet you." The handshake lasted 3 seconds. When she pulled away, Danny felt like something significant had happened. "Norma Jeane. My real name. Before Hollywood. Before all of this. Why tell me?" She met his eyes, and he saw sadness. Deep and old and unfixable. "Because nobody here knows me as anything but Marilyn. And just for a minute, I wanted to be real." Then her press agent called and she turned away. But she looked back once. "Thank you for building this, Danny. It's perfect." He would remember that moment for the rest of his life. Not because she was Marilyn Monroe, but because for 3 seconds she was Norma Jeane. And Norma Jeane had seen him as a person, not a uniform. The first show was scheduled for 2 p.m. on February 17th. By noon, 100,000 men packed shoulder to shoulder in the February cold. Some had marched for hours, some had gone AWOL just for the chance to see her. The mood was electric, frantic, almost religious. Men who'd stopped feeling anything suddenly felt want again. Backstage, a flimsy tent, Marilyn was being transformed. The metamorphosis took 2 hours. First the body, hot shower, barely lukewarm, then undergarments, corset, girdle, stockings, engineered bra, each piece armor, hiding Norma Jeane beneath Marilyn. Then the face. The makeup artist Gloria worked with sculptor's focus, foundation thick and heavy, covering freckles and scars. "You're shaking," Gloria said. "Cold." Marilyn lied. "Bullshit. You're terrified." Their eyes met in the mirror. Every girl gets that look before going on live. No second takes, no editors, just you and them. What if I freeze? Then you freeze, and 100,000 men still go home happy. You can't fail at this. You just have to show up. False eyelashes came next, making her eyes bigger, more available. The beauty mark, drawn with precision. Finally, red lips, the color of sex without saying it. You're Marilyn now, Gloria said. Go make them cry. The costume arrived at 1:30 p.m., a purple sequined gown so tight Marilyn had to be sewn into it. No zipper, just thread and tension. The neckline plunged obscenely low, the slit ran impossibly high. In 25-degree weather, it was a glittering torture device. I can't breathe in this, she whispered. You don't need to breathe, her press agent said, already drunk. You just need to look like a dream. Through the tent, she could hear them, chanting, whistling, screaming her name. Marilyn, 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 like prayer, like hunger. The band leader appeared. We're ready, Miss Monroe. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror, saw Marilyn staring back, perfect and painted. The Norma Jeane underneath was screaming to run, but Marilyn Monroe didn't run. She took a breath as deep as the dress allowed and stood. The world tilted. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. The corset made her dizzy, but she was Marilyn now, and Marilyn could do anything. She stepped out. The cold hit like a physical blow. Her skin broke into goosebumps immediately, but she kept the smile fixed, kept walking toward the stage, and then she walked onto it. The roar was instant, deafening, primal. 100,000 men screaming at once doesn't sound human. It sounds like nature, an avalanche, an earthquake. It sounds like everything. Marilyn froze at the microphone, blinded by flashbulbs, deafened by adoration, and for one terrible second, she forgot how to be Marilyn Monroe. She was just Norma Jeane, 27, freezing in a dress made of wishful thinking, staring at an ocean of desperate need. Her hands shook, her knees locked, her mind went blank. I can't do this. Then the music started. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Something shifted. Muscle memory took over. 10 years of being Marilyn. Her hand reached for the microphone stand, and she started to sing. Her voice was small at first, that breathy whisper, but the soldiers didn't care. They pressed forward, straining to see her. She moved across the stage, careful in the heels, and the crowd moved with her like a tide. 100,000 men breathing as one. In the front rows she could see their faces. Boys, really. 18, 19, 20. Some had bandages, some had the distant stare of men who'd killed, and they were crying, tears streaming down faces caked with dirt, strong men sobbing like children. They weren't looking at her like producers did, like a product to be sold. They weren't looking at her like photographers did, like meat. They weren't looking at her like Joe did, like a possession. They were looking at her like she was home, like she was the last good thing in the world, like she was every girl they'd left behind, every reason they hadn't eaten a bullet yet. She finished Diamonds. The roar tripled. She sang Bye Bye Baby. The roar became prayer. She did the shimmy, and 100,000 men remembered life was worth living. Between songs, she talked to them, not scripted lines, just talking. You know, I was so nervous coming here. I thought, what if they don't like me? What if I'm just disappointing? A soldier shouted, We love you, Marilyn. The crowd erupted in agreement. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it wasn't practiced. It was real, breakable, human. I love you too, she whispered into the microphone. All of you, every single one of you. And she meant it. Because in that moment, on that stage, in that frozen mud, Marilyn Monroe finally understood what it felt like to be loved. Not for the mask, not for the measurements, but for showing up, for being there, for standing in the cold and proving someone still gave a damn about boys who might die tomorrow. She performed for 45 minutes, 10 songs, did the whole show twice that day, because they couldn't fit everyone. By the end of the second show, she couldn't feel her feet. The sequins had cut her skin. Her voice was shredded. Her makeup ran from tears she hadn't realized she was crying, and she had never been happier. Backstage, wrapped in army blankets, she wouldn't stop talking. Did you see them? Did you see their faces? She grabbed Danny by the shoulders, makeup running in black rivers. They really loved me. Not Marilyn. Me. She performed 3 more shows over the next 3 days, each in sub-zero temperatures, each in dresses that should have killed her. And after each show, she stayed for hours, signing autographs until her hand cramped, taking pictures until cameras ran out of film, hugging soldiers who shook with sobs. On the second day, a soldier asked why she came. For you, she said simply. Because you needed to see something beautiful. Because you deserved to remember what you're fighting for. On the third day, a 19-year-old from Texas said she looked like his dead sister. Car accident. I haven't cried about it until now. But you smile like her. Marilyn hugged him for a full minute, let him cry into her shoulder, ruined her dress and didn't care. When he pulled away, she kissed his forehead. Live, she whispered, whatever it takes. Just live. On the fourth day, the temperature dropped below zero. Officers considered cancelling. We can't send her out in this. She'll get hypothermia. But Marilyn stormed into the command tent. I'm performing. I didn't come all this way to quit because of weather. These boys are in danger every day. They don't get to quit. Neither do I. She performed the final show in a blizzard. Wind so strong it nearly knocked her off stage. Cold so intense her lips turned blue through the lipstick. She sang 10 songs. Stayed 2 hours afterward, signing autographs with numb fingers. When they got her back, Gloria had to cut her out of the dress. You're insane. You could have died. No, Marilyn said, her voice distant, dreamy. I was alive out there. For the first time in my life, I was completely alive. On the flight back to Tokyo, she couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying the moments. The first roar, the boy who cried, the soldier who said she looked like his sister, the feeling of being loved, not desired or objectified, but genuinely loved for showing up and giving a shit. This changes everything, she whispered. Joe will understand. When I tell him what it felt like, he'll understand. But Joe didn't understand anything. She rushed into the suite like a child with a trophy, her face lit with joy. Joe, the papers said 100,000 came. They weren't just looking at me like meat. They were really seeing me, the real me, Norma Jeane, and they loved her. He stood, looked at her with dark, cold, final eyes. You humiliated me. My wife, shaking her ass for 100,000 men while I sat here reading about it. The glow died. Marilyn's smile faltered. Norma Jeane's heart broke into pieces so small they'd never fit back. But I was helping them. I needed a wife. Not a whore, not a performer, not Marilyn fucking Monroe. A wife, and you chose them over me. I didn't choose. You did. You chose the adoration. You chose being Marilyn. He grabbed his jacket. I'm going out. Don't wait up. The door slammed. She stood in the middle of the suite, still smelling like Korea, and felt something crack. She understood that the thing she needed to survive, being Marilyn, being loved by crowds, being seen, was the thing that would destroy every personal relationship she'd ever have. You couldn't be a goddess and a wife. You had to choose, and she'd already chosen. The moment she walked onto that stage and felt what it was like to matter. Joe left her 8 months later, October 1954. The divorce made headlines. The press blamed her. Marilyn Monroe, too hot for marriage. Nobody wrote about Korea, about the best 4 days of her life, about the moment she finally felt real. Nobody cared that for 45 minutes on a frozen stage, Norma Jeane felt like she mattered, like she was enough, like she was loved for who she was. Danny Reeves kept the photograph for 60 years. Black and white, grainy, taken February 17, 1954. Marilyn in the purple dress, mid-song, arm extended. But if you looked close, you could see her eyes. Not Marilyn's sultry gaze, Norma Jeane's eyes, scared and brave and heartbreakingly alive. He kept it in a frame on his desk for 6 decades. Through college, marriage, 3 children, teaching career, his wife's death, through everything. He was 83 when a reporter found him in 2014, doing a piece on USO tours. What do you remember most about Marilyn Monroe? Danny looked at the photograph for a long time. She asked me to call her Norma Jeane. On that stage, in that cold, with all those boys screaming, she wasn't pretending. She was real. More real than I think she ever got to be again. I think for 4 days, she got to be the person she actually was instead of the person Hollywood made her. And I think it killed her that nobody else ever let her be that real again. Marilyn Monroe died 8 years after Korea, August 5, 1962, alone in her bedroom, surrounded by empty pill bottles and the crushing weight of being Marilyn Monroe 24 hours a day for 15 years. The world mourned Marilyn, the icon, the sexpot, the blonde bombshell. But Danny mourned Norma Jeane, the girl who for 4 frozen days in Korea learned what it felt like to be loved for who she really was, and then went home to a man who wanted her to forget, who wanted her to choose between being seen and being safe. She chose being seen, and it cost her everything. But standing on that stage with 100,000 men screaming her name and tears freezing on her cheeks and the dress cutting her skin, she'd been completely, impossibly, painfully alive. And for Norma Jeane, who'd spent her entire childhood being invisible, who'd spent her entire life being looked at but never seen, those 4 days were worth dying for. Even if it took 8 more years for the pills to finish what Hollywood had started,